Sean Diddy Combs is facing more explosive allegations in a bombshell lawsuit, this one filed by his reportedly former executive assistant, who claims he was coerced into setting up drug-fueled parties and even performing degrading acts to prove his loyalty to the music mogul.
No expansion of
We're
the
going to break
investigation,
down these latest
no
shocking
isolation
details of
orders,
alleged sexual
no
coercion,
equipment
abuse,
access,
and manipulation,
no
and how
suspension
this
of attorney
adds to the
communication.
mounting legal troubles
Everything
for Sean
inside
Diddy
solitary
Combs.
block C
Welcome to
continued
Sidebar
as
presented
before.
by Law&Crime.
Everything
I'm Jesse
except
Weber.
the fear.
Well,
If a
it is
female
another
warden
day,
can vanish
and it is
after a
another
single
Diddy
nothing
lawsuit.
except the
Yeah,
fear.
this time from
If
a
a
man
female
who
warden
he was
can
the
vanish
former
after a
executive
single
assistant
note,
of the
the ones
disgraced
who once
rapper and
worked
music
overnight in that
producer,
area,
and he's accusing
the ones
Diddy
who
of
filed for
essentially
leave without
sexual
giving a
coercion,
reason,
abuse,
the
battery,
ones who
sex
saw but
trafficking,
never spoke.
intentional
No
infliction
one
of
mentions the
emotional
note,
distress,
but
and
everyone
all
knows it
stems, he
appeared.
says, from what happened
And if what
at
it
these
says is
lavish
true,
drug-fueled
then
nights called
punishment.
Wild King
Part 3.
Nights.
The person
so
no longer in the system.
lawsuit,
The
which was
internal
reviewed by
personnel
multiple
database of the
outlets,
Atlanta
including
Federal
Rolling
Detention
Stone,
Center
was
updated
apparently
its weekly
filed in
roster.
Los Angeles
Under
by
the
a man
category
named Phillip
Special
Pines,
Personnel Code
who says he
Adjustment,
worked for Diddy
the name
from
of Warden
2019 to
TD was marked
2021.
as removed
so
from
actually
system
more
by
recent than
administrative
some
order.
other suits we've seen
There was no
against
decision
Shaw
number
Combs that have been
recorded.
in the early
It was
2000s or
deactivated.
even the 90s.
Her personal
but according
contact
to reporting
information
in the suit,
disappeared
Pines
from the
is
internal
alleging a few
network
different
exactly
things here.
36
Now,
hours
before
after
we
she
even get
filed her
into it,
complaint.
and there is a
The
lot
change
to get
log
into,
was
you might be
executed from
wondering
the
what the
system's
heck does
highest
that name
access
mean?
level server,
What are we
a
talking
device
about
bearing
when we
the
said
identifier
Wild King Nights?
DCCA1,
Well, part of this
located
lawsuit
in the
alleges
coordination
that Pines
office on
had
the
to
fourth
prove his
floor of the
loyalty to
Security
Shaw
Administration
Combs,
Wing.
who was dubbed the King by
Only two
performing
individuals
sex acts for
possess
him,
the authority
hence
to
the name
perform a
Wild
system-level
King
personnel
Nights.
removal at
The
that
suit
tier,
even
the
reportedly
head of
says
Federal
that
Human
Pines was
Resources
treated, quote,
and
like an
Detention
animal
Center.
playing fetch in order to
No
prove
confirmation
his loyalty. And by the way,
exists as patient
that is
was
just
made.
one of the many
The removal
disturbing
of Warden
details in this
TD's
lawsuit.
name was not
So to help
accompanied
me
by
break
any
it down,
or
I want to
protective
bring on friend of
reassignment.
the show, defense
At
attorney
11:20
Mauricio
a.m.,
Padilla,
a printed
who has
copy
been
of
our
the
go-to
personnel
as we've been
deployment chart
covering
was
the Shaw
generated
Combs
in
saga.
preparation for the new
Mauricio.
week's schedule.
So good to see you.
Under the
Thanks so
section
much,
marked
Holidays.
Internal Alert,
Before we get
TD's
into
name.
thank you. Before we get into the specifics here, you know, I feel like we're almost becoming numb to the lawsuit, after the lawsuit, and do all of the allegations against Combs so far that we've seen make the claims here. These new claims, do you think it makes it more or less true? In other words, does the fact that a lawsuit comes out in late 2024 as opposed to maybe at the beginning of the year, right after he was arrested, but, you know, on the heels of all the allegations so far, how should we all be thinking about yet another lawsuit against Shaw Combs? I think little by little, it's chipping away at whatever he's got left as far as reputation-wise. I mean, I think when I rate it, the biggest key factor for me is that we're talking about somebody that was under his employee, if that allegation is true. If this was actually somebody that was employed by him from 2019 to 2021, he's got a problem on his hands, because this, not just a Jane Doe or John Doe or a random person, this is someone that was, you know, in his circle under his employee. So the allegations are serious, and as we've seen, could be foreshadowing testimony in the criminal case. When I read this, I can't fathom that the prosecutors aren't going to want to talk to him or include him, especially regarding the allegations of scrubbing his cell phone and other devices for evidence. Things of that nature that when you read it, it really, you know, it goes hand in hand with the indictment. I want to get into that, especially the time frame, because let's keep this in mind. Prosecutors have alleged criminal conduct from 2008 to 2020, a bit more of these allegations. Starting with what Pines says he was in charge of doing for these parties. What was his job? So one of the things Pines alleges here is that he was responsible for setting up these gatherings, which reportedly involved heavy usage of various illegal drugs and alcohol and sexual paraphernalia. And sometimes it would take place inside of Diddy's bedroom. He says that Diddy instructed him to prepare spaces with these specific items. Quote, Phillip was instructed by Sean Combs on multiple occasions to ensure his personal bedroom and or various hotel rooms were set up with red lights, ice buckets, alcohol, marijuana joints, honey packs for male libido, baby oil, Astroglide towels, illegal drugs, and I'm sorry to say this power banger, sex machines. That's the way it's categorized. Now, if you're unfamiliar, Astroglide is a lubricant, and also on that list allegedly was an erectile dysfunction drug called Callus and the morning after pill. So these party supplies, he says, it's kept in a bag called the MVP. According to Rolling Stone, who says it reviewed a copy of the lawsuit, Pine says he couldn't just leave the supplies in the hallway and walk away. No, he alleges he had to be let into the room, meaning he ended up seeing what was going on behind closed doors. So to speak, by the something very interesting here, I want to talk about is that Pine makes mention of fact that he was exposed to what was allegedly going on inside these rooms. He couldn't just drop the stuff off and leave. If those allegations are true, how does that impact the strength of his claim, the strength of this lawsuit? Because allegedly he's a key eyewitness. And not only that, but he says that he was forced to look at the videos that memorialize these parties and these events when he was scrubbing the videos off of his phone. And he actually says that he was intimidated and threatened that if Sean Combs' family were to ever find the videos or images, that he would never work in the industry again. So not only was he seeing the actual events that occurred, but he was also referenced to have to look at the videos and images that were when you have to scrub the phone. I mean, listen, this case is all-encompassing to the point that P. Diddy has successfully vilified baby oil. And if anybody thinks that that's not true, this Valentine show up to your bedroom with a bottle of baby oil and see what your spouse says. Wow, they're not going to like it. What is that? What a year. One of the things is, the thing that stuck out to me, you mentioned it before, these allegations are so consistent with what the allegations are that are laid up by prosecutors when they described the freak-offs in their indictment, right? These sex-fueled parties, these drug-fueled parties, the baby oil, the Astroglide, and it makes me wonder, do you think Mr. Pines is a cooperating witness for the government? B, if so, do you think he was one of the people that they originally spoke to when they were coming up with this, when they were drafting the indictment and coming up with the charges? Or do you think he's come out after? Because, again, I think the timing of the lawsuit's important at the end of the year right now. Talk to me about what you think his role might be. If I had to guess, I would figure that the feds already talked to him, just because I know from my experience dealing with them how all-encompassing their investigations are. And if he really was his executive from the time frame that they allege in the lawsuit, I can't see a scenario where they wouldn't. They investigate regular cases to the point that that I'm shocked when I see it as a commercial defense attorney with late regular people. When you're talking about high-profile celebrity case like this, I can't fathom that no one spoke to this individual
and no longer has a
prior to
voice
this.
who will pursue
So I would
justice
think
for
that-
her accusation.
Yeah, I would think that
As of
they
the
did
taken
speak
against
to
Diddy,
him, and
no
I can't
expansion of the
imagine
investigation,
that he's
no
not a
isolation
witness,
orders,
because
no
the way
equipment
that
access,
they work
no
is
suspension
they
of
want
attorney
everybody
communication.
that can cooperate
Everything
the theory
inside
of the
solitary
case to
block
be
C
on their
continued as
witnesses,
before.
or to be
Everything
somebody
except
that
the fear.
they can,
If
they
a
can
female
call in.
warden can
I
vanish
can't
after a
think
single
that
note,
if he
except
actually
the
was
fear.
his assistant
If
for
a
this
female
time
warden
frame,
can
he
vanish
would be
after
an
a single
excellent
note,
witness for
ones
them.
who once
See, the
worked
problem
overnight
is
in that
we
area,
don't know
the
who
ones who
witnesses
filed for
are
leave without
in
giving
that
a reason,
criminal
the
case
ones who
yet.
saw
I
but
know
never
when we're gonna
spoke.
know, maybe
No one
closer
mentions
to
the
trial,
note,
but
but
you have to
everyone knows
imagine
it
that
appeared.
their case
And
is
if what it
built
says
on
is true,
more than
then
just
punishment.
the testimony
Part
of
3.
one alleged victim.
The person no
right?
longer in the system.
Victim
The
one in
internal
the
personnel
indictment,
database
it
of
has
the
to be
Atlanta
more.
Federal Detention
And even
Center
if we
updated
assume
its weekly
victim one
roster.
is
Under the
Cassandra
category
Ventura,
Special Personnel
Paul's
Code
ex-girlfriend,
Adjustment,
who
the
filed
name
that
of
initial
Warden
lawsuit
TD was marked
against
as
him,
removed from
recounted
system
a
by
lot of these
administrative
details
order.
that are
There was no
consistent
decision
with the
number
indictment,
recorded, but
talking
was
about the
deactivated.
freak-offs and
Her
all
personal
this.
contact
It has to
information
be more than
disappeared from
just
the internal
her.
network
So
exactly
when I hear
36
something
hours
like
after
this,
she filed
I
her
will tell
complaint.
you out of a lot of
The change log
lawsuits
was
that I've
executed
covered
from
over
the
past
system's
several
highest
months.
access
This
level
is one of
server,
them.
a device
One of the
bearing
few
the
that I
identifier
actually think is the
DCCA1,
most
located in the
consistent with what
coordination office on the
prosecutors are
4th floor
charging
of the Security
Sharon Combs
Administration
with,
Wing.
right? Sex
Only
trafficking,
2 individuals
racketeering,
possess the authority to
conspiracy,
perform a system-level
transportation to
personnel
engage
removal at that
in
tier,
prostitution,
the head of
and
Federal
it just
Human
makes me
Resources
think that
and the detention
this is why
center.
he may play such
No
a
confirmation
CR control. He
exists
could be
as
wrong,
patient
though.
was made.
And it
The
also
removal of
talks
Warden
about
TD's
Sean
name
Combs
was not
physically
accompanied by
attacking
any
guests.
or protective reassignment.
somebody in the stomach,
At
that he
11:20
kicked somebody
a.m., a printed
in the
copy of the
buttocks.
personnel
So it's
deployment
really
chart was
tying
generated
together
in preparation for the
theory
new
that
week's schedule.
The prosecution
Under
has
the
put out
section
there
marked
in their
Internal Alert,
indictment.
TD's
And
name.
yeah, I mean, I believe that he is a witness. I mean, it's really mimicking a lot of the same things that the federal government is saying that Sean Combs was up to during this time period. And because the government says, it was a racketeering conspiracy, it was a criminal enterprise. He had associates of his who would set up these events, and also clean up these events, which, by the way, let me get back to this lawsuit, because Pine says his role didn't just stop at preparing this. He also says he had to clean up these rooms afterwards, and the cleanup is not any less disturbing. According to the lawsuit, TLF would remove any evidence of drugs, condoms, sex toys, remove bodily stains like blood, urine, and fluids from any sheets, furniture, and pack away all the items used during Wild King nights. And all of this cleanup, he says, was also part of a cover-up so that no one would suspect anything was going on, and that alleged cover-up also included leaving very large tips for the housekeeping staff to essentially prevent them from reporting anything, and going even further into the duties of his supposed cleanup. This also extended, as we were talking about, to wiping Diddy's personal devices of any evidence. According to the lawsuit reviewed by Rolling Stone, TLFF was further instructed to scrub Shara Combs' personal devices, including, but not limited to, personal phones, laptops, tablets, of any compromising videos. And by the way, unfortunately, in doing so, says he was once again unwillingly exposed to the alleged conduct that was occurring in order to accomplish this unreasonable task. Plaintiff would have to, again, unwillingly see the video and then erase it. Okay, Mauricio, let me ask you this. How does he prove this? How does he prove all this happens? It just his testimony. Will you try to subpoena those people to come forward? How do you prove something was deleted? Talk to me. Well, first of all, I can only imagine how sloppy Sean Combs was with evidence when he got busted with those 2 machine guns or 3 machine guns with the altered serial numbers. So I really don't trust Sean Combs or the people around him's ability to properly cover up anything. So I envision that you're going to see a trial, payments from his AMX for flights, for people, straight payments directly from his company to people. And then the time frame is important because this happened in hotels and places that have surveillance, that there's records that could be consistent with his testimony about when he alleges that these parties took place. He probably has his own information about who attended the events. When you're somebody like Sean Combs, you're such a celebrity and you're engaged in this type of behavior, people around you are memorializing it. It's on their own. So I feel like this guy probably was creating his case prior to him even filing this lawsuit back when it was happening, because when you're, part of this, and if this is true, that he's, threatening you with a threat of being fired, with a threat of, being ostracized in the industry. He may have taken steps to memorialize this himself, saying, you know what, I may have to defend myself in the future, and I'm going to start keeping records of what's going on. So I wouldn't doubt it if we see something like that. Does it hurt or help him that I'm talking about Mr. Pines, that he could be seen as an active participant in this, that he was complicit in it? Does it hurt his case? Does it hurt maybe if he takes the stand, testifies against Sean Combs at a criminal trial? I mean, listen, it's a double-edged sword. If it hurts or it helps, yeah, he was complicit. He even admits in his lawsuit that he went as far as to start having sex with this woman when Sean Combs forced him, but then he felt bad. So a lot of people are going to be like, well, you felt bad about it, but you got erection and you started to have sex with her. So how badly did you feel about it? And I'm sure that his lawyers, Sean Combs' lawyers, are going to attack that. Like, yeah, you were a willing participant. You actually had sex with this woman. You penetrated her, and all of a sudden, years later, you want to back out and say, I wasn't a willing participant. I was forced, and I think you're going to see that a lot in the criminal trial as well, where they're going to be like, oh, all of a sudden, Sean Combs flew you to a destination, paid you $20,000 to take part in an orgy, gave you drugs you're the victim, you weren't, you didn't want to do it. And I think that we're going to see that a lot, not only from Mr. Pines, but from a lot of the witnesses that are going to come forward in the actual case, where Sean Combs' attorneys are going to be,
present, and no longer has a
labeling them
voice who
as,
will pursue justice for her
willing
accusation.
participants in something
As of the
that is
taken
not
against Diddy,
illegal.
no
The
expansion
problem
of the
is that,
investigation,
as
no isolation
as
orders,
we've discussed
no
in
equipment
before,
access,
even if you were
no
doing
suspension
this
of attorney
on the regular
communication.
since
Everything inside
2008,
solitary
it's
block C
illegal,
continued
and
as
it's illegal
before.
to pay somebody
Everything
to
except
cross
the
state
fear.
lines to
If a
perform
female
oral
warden
sex
can
acts,
vanish after
and
a
it's
single
illegal,
note, thing
and
except
it's
the
illegal
fear.
to cross the
If a
lines
female
with
warden can
drugs to
vanish
have
after a
these
single
orgies.
note,
This
ones who
stuff's
once worked
illegal,
overnight in that
and
area, the ones who
main
filed
one of
for
the
leave
main
without giving a
underlying
reason,
themes
the
in
ones who saw
indictment,
but never
and I
spoke.
think you could
No one
argue
mentions the
here, is
note,
the element
but everyone
of
knows it
using,
appeared.
fraud,
And if what it
force,
says is
or
true,
coercion
then
to force
punishment.
people to
Part
engage
3.
in these
The person no longer
alleged
in the system.
sex
The
acts,
internal personnel
because according
database
to
of the
review,
Atlanta Federal
by
Detention
Rolling
Center
Stone,
updated its
Pines
weekly
says,
roster.
if the
Under the
devices,
category Special
going back to
Personnel
the
Code
devices,
Adjustment,
for
the name
example,
of Warden
if the
TD was marked
devices
as
weren't
removed
wiped
from
clean,
system by
he said,
administrative
there would
order.
be severe
There was no
consequences.
decision number
Claimed
recorded.
if
It was deactivated.
true that
Her personal
if
contact
any of
information
Sean Combs'
disappeared from
family
the internal
sees the
network
videos
exactly
either on the
36
personal
hours
device
after
or
she filed her
cloud-based
complaint.
storage PF,
The changelog
would be
was
terminated
executed
with
from the
negative
system's
comments,
highest
so
access
that
level
he could
server,
never be
a
in the
device bearing the
entertainment
identifier
industry. That's something you mentioned,
DCCA1,
Mauricio,
located
and
in
I
the
think
Coordination
that's
Office
interesting.
on the
By
fourth
the way,
floor
on
of
a
the
side
Security
note,
Administration
if that is
Wing.
true, why
Only
maybe
2
in the
individuals
face of all
possess
these
the authority to
allegations,
perform
his
a
family has
system-level
stood by
personnel
him,
removal at
right?
that tier,
So
the
if
head of
all
Federal
this is
Human
true,
Resources
it does
and
make
Detention
if all
Center.
this is true, and again,
No
Sean Combs
confirmation
has not been
exists
found
as was
guilty.
made.
He's not been
The
found
removal of
liable
Warden
in any
TD's
of these
name was not
lawsuits.
accompanied
But
by
if
any
all of
or
this is
protective
true,
reassignment.
It makes me wonder,
At
did he
11:20 a.m., a
compartmentalize
printed
his
copy
life
of the
and
personnel
keep it away
deployment
from
chart was
his
generated
family
in
because they
preparation
have
for the
been
new
backing
week's
him?
schedule.
So let's
Under the
start
section
there.
marked
So,
Internal Alert,
what
TD's
do you
name
think about that, Mauricio? Well, I mean, listen, it seems to me from the lawsuit that I read involving his son that he really wasn't compartmentalizing anything with his son, because apparently his son was involved in these parties, at least the one on the super yacht that ended up in a lawsuit. The issue is, I mean, when you're Sean Cole's son and you're 20 years old, and your dad isn't drawing boldly defined lines in what's acceptable and what's not, one can imagine that maybe his son was mimicking his father, committing the same mistakes as his father. And that's a problem because, as we discussed before, the federal government loves superseding indictments, and they love to rope in your family members. That may not be the issue in this case, because they could lose the battle of public opinion. People may be like, wow, they're going too far in indicting his son. But that's something that I've seen a lot in my career, and I think a lot of criminal defense attorneys have seen. So far what we've said in the indictment: has Mr. Pines committed a crime? Why do I ask that? You think he has been offered some sort of immunity to testify, again, assuming he would be a cooperating witness in a criminal case based on these allegations? Has he done something illegal by wiping the devices, by paying off the house staff, by cleaning things up, where he would be offered immunity to testify against Sean Combs? I mean, maybe he maybe theoretically he could be part of this sex traffic operation or this racketeering operation. What's your thoughts? Well, listen, anytime that, from what I've read, if they wanted to say that he was part of the
From the federal raid on
conspiracy, they
Diddy's
could,
$40
because
million Los
anybody that
Angeles estate were
helps in
released,
furtherance
no one
of the
expected this.
conspiracy
Neatly
can be
stacked in
roped
display
into it.
cabinets like
So
prized
if you were
possessions were
handing out
200
drugs,
bottles
you
of
were
baby
FC
oil.
scrubbing
Right next to them,
devices. If
over
you were,
900 bottles of
picking
lubricant.
up
Rows and
sex
rows.
workers
It
at the
looked less like
airport
a home
and
and more
bringing
like a
them to the
warehouse for
hotel,
something far more
yeah,
disturbing.
you're part
These
of
weren't
it.
the kind of
So
items most
I would
people keep in
envision
bulk,
that
but for
if the
investigators, it
government
painted a
wanted
chilling
him
picture.
to testify,
Why would one of the most
they would
powerful
offer
men in
him
hip-hop need this
immunity
much?
because
And
you're
more
right.
importantly,
Some of
what
the
exactly
things
were
that
they
he
used
says
for?
could lead to, admissions of guilt and wrongdoing in the criminal sense. So I would envision that they would offer him immunity. Interesting. Now, by the way, his responsibilities, we talked about him allegedly setting up and cleaning up these, alleged escapades, but that is not where the lawsuit ends. Was talking about before there was another harrowing allegation of what could be considered sexual coercion in a very particularly graphic revelation where Pines claims that Diddy allegedly forced him to expose himself to a female guest at Diddy command, to which Pines says he participated out of fear of consequences. And the way he says this played out, according to the lawsuit, began with Diddy allegedly massaging him, forcing him to take a shot of tequila before pushing him into a female gay. And remember how we mentioned that this was what the supposed meaning behind these wild king nights was. Well, it's Rolling Stone who mentions that this appears in this lawsuit, was sexually rubbing the shoulder of the plaintiff, Pines, informing him to show loyalty to the king. And the next part is just graphic, but let me just say, it involved Pines supposedly having sex with this female guest, and then exposing himself to Combs as well. And now, after he says he went along with this because he was fearful, and then he steps out of the room, apparently upset. Mauricio, he's suing, my understanding, based on reporting for a number of causes of action here: sexual battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Does that apply to these circumstances? Everything I've described so far? Yeah, I mean, listen, intentional infliction of emotional distress, based on what he's describing here, is completely account that could survive. Everything that he's saying is the type of thing that it could be defended, but it's definitely something that Sean Combs has to worry about. Civil. And they also sued his companies. So it's not only him, it's Bad Boy Records, and it's a couple of other companies that under Sean Combs' control. The allegations, especially the ones that include violence, I pretty alarming. Listen, if I was cross-examining this guy, at the end of the day, he admits that, he penetrated this woman. And if you penetrate somebody, yeah, there's an issue of were you aroused or not. I mean, you forced or not, did you want to or not? And when a man penetrates a woman, the argument is, and I'm sure this is going to come up in trial or in deposition, you wanted to do it, at least at some level, you were wrecked, and you penetrated her so well. I mean,
present,
the other way,
and no longer
is
has a voice who will pursue justice for her accusation.
The other way of flipping
As of the
narrative
taken against
is
Diddy,
like,
no expansion of the investigation, no isolation orders, no equipment access, no suspension of attorney communication. Everything inside solitary block C continued as before. Everything except the fear. If a female warden can vanish after a single note, thing except the fear. If a female warden can vanish after a single note, ones who once worked overnight in that area, the ones who filed for leave without giving a reason, the ones who saw but never spoke. No one mentions the note, but everyone knows it appeared. And if what it
ago,
says is
who was at
true,
the
then
height of his
punishment.
power,
Part
wealth,
3.
and fame.
The person no
I mean,
longer in the
that is
system.
something
The internal personnel
that is a
database of the
common
Atlanta
theme
Federal
throughout
Detention Center
all these
updated its
cases,
weekly
and
roster.
one of the
Under the
reasons
category
why
Special
you have
Personnel
seen
Code
number
Adjustment,
of these
the name of
lawsuits
Warden
come
TD
out
was marked
after
as removed
Sean
from
Combs
system by
was
administrative
either,
order. There was no decision
indicted
number
or
recorded,
arrested,
but was
and
deactivated.
particularly
Her personal
after his
contact
bail was
information
denied.
disappeared
So
from
I
the
think that
internal
was a big
network
concept
exactly
too, is
36
that
hours
he no
after she
longer,
filed her complaint.
can
The
attack
changelog
you,
was
and he
executed
can
from
no
the
longer,
system's highest
be
access
a
level
threat to
server,
you.
a
That, at
device
least,
bearing
is
the identifier
allegation,
DCCA1,
put forward,
located in the
and one of
coordination
the
office on the
reasonings
4th
that's
floor of
been
the
put
Security
forward by
Administration
a
Wing.
number of his accusers.
Only 2
And, by the
individuals
way,
possess
let
the
me just
authority to
go back
perform
to
a
this.
system-level
So,
personnel
while
removal
Diddy,
at
of
that
course,
tier,
is at
the head
the
of Federal
center of
Human
these
Resources
allegations,
and
as
Detention Center.
Mauricio said,
No
in this
confirmation
lawsuit
exists
that
as
was reviewed by
was
Rolling
made.
Stone,
The
he's
removal
named
of Warden
Combs
TD's name was not
Enterprises,
accompanied
Bad
by
Boy
any
Entertainment,
or protective
and a
reassignment.
senior employee named
At 11:20
Christina
a.m.,
Quorum.
a printed
Now,
copy of
Quorum
the personnel
was
deployment
mentioned
chart
in
was
a
generated
filing
in
by music
preparation for the new
producer
week's schedule.
Rodney Jones. I
Under
want
the
to talk
section
about him
marked
for a second
Internal
here,
Alert,
because
TD's name
Christina Quorum is allegedly Shaw Combs' right-hand woman. She's even been described as a sort of Ghislaine Maxwell-type figure to Combs, and we know, of course, that Maxwell is the woman who is convicted of trafficking young girls in behalf of her boss, Jeffrey Epstein, or her boyfriend, her accomplice, whatever you want to call him. Now, according to a complaint that we've talked about here before, this was filed by Rodney Jones as the chief of staff defendant. Quorum was instrumental in organizing and executing the RICO and TVPA enterprises. That's the sex traffic enterprises. And of course, we can't be totally sure what her alleged role is in these Wild King nights, but that is just some background, little bit on Miss Quorum. And Mauricio, I want to circle back with you on this, because I do wonder, Shaw Combs is the only one being charged right now. The government's been a little bit shy about whether or not there's going to be a superseding indictment. Why did I think there hasn't been additional charges? Do you think there would be charges against additional other people after Sean Combs' trial in May? Or do you think that there's a situation where people are going to be cooperating with the government and testifying against it? I think it's a latter. I think people are going to be cooperating with the government, testifying against them. I see it all the time in regular cases. I don't see why that would change in a case of this magnitude. And I believe that people around him must have been complicit. I think that he felt that he was above the law. This is somebody that not a pardon, one of his best friends that was in prison for drugs.
When the first images from the federal raid on Diddy's $40 million Los Angeles estate were released, no one expected this.
So
neatly stacked in display cabinets like prized possessions were 200 bottles of baby oil. Right next to them, over 900 bottles of lubricant, rows and rows. It looked less like a home and more like a warehouse for something far more disturbing. These weren't the kind of items most people keep in bulk, but for investigators, it painted a chilling picture. Why would one of the most powerful men in hip-hop need this much? And more importantly, what exactly were they used for?
Do you want to testify, or do you want to, possibly do time? I think we're going to see a lot of people testifying against them. And it's not that just even a power dynamic between an employer and employee. It's the power dynamic between C comes as your employer and you as the employee. I think that's going to be a big theme. As I mentioned before now, as for Sean Combs, we mentioned he's facing federal charges, charge racketeering, and sex trafficking. He's pleading not guilty to these charges. He's presumed innocent until proven guilty. But Jackson attorneys denied these allegations in its lawsuit, saying in a statement to Rolling Stone magazine, no matter how many lawsuits are filed, it won't change the fact that Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted or sex trafficked anyone, man or woman, adult or minor. We live in a world anyone can file a lawsuit for any reason. Fortunately, a fair and impartial judicial process exists to find the truth and Mr. Combs. Combs is confident he will prevail in court. Real quick, Marcin, before we wrap this up, he is right. He is innocent until proven guilty. If he is acquitted in his criminal trial, what happens to the other lawsuits? You think they still go forward? Yeah, they go forward. You're dealing with a different, whether it's reasonable doubt or preponderance of the evidence, you could be found in not guilty of a criminal case, but they could have, more than enough evidence to convict you in a civil trial. These civil guys are looking for money. They're not gonna stop no matter what, even if he's acquitted or not. It's a completely different threshold, and I don't see them stopping until they actually, get money from him, which is what they want. But sick that these planes, who, as I mentioned, came forward, particularly after Combs was arrested, and now he's been denied bail. If he is acquitted and he is released, do you think that they'll still want to go after him? Well, and I think so, because their names already in the media, they've already started, this fight. That means if he's insane and he's out and you're fearful of, retribution, you're still on his hit list, no matter what. Just because you started, might as well finish it, and might as try and get your money. Lawsuits cost money, so they and for everything that they put forward regarding cost. So they're going to want to generate revenue from these lawsuits. So I don't think they're going to stop until they get money. Mauricio Pilla, good seeing you. Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks, man. Thanks so much. All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your pod. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.